Yes, live. Kia ora koutou katoa. A very warm welcome to those of you that are actually here live today, but also for those of you that are watching the recording afterwards. Kia ora, and thank you for tuning in. Ko waia, ko Baruch Jacob toku ingoa, no ini ahau, he tangata tiriti ahau, no hānau ki Tamaki Makaurau, ki Kaipātiki. I'm Baruch Jacob, tangata tiriti from India. And I live in Auckland, in Tamaki Makaurau, in the area called Kaipātiki. So today's conversation, as all of them, is going to be quite thinking aloud with a good friend and a really respected colleague. I mean, it's been a fascinating set of conversations I have had with Rereahu over the years, and hoping to continue that here today. And let's see where this goes. So as always, I'm asking sort of roughly 3 questions. What is he trying to change in the world? What's getting in the way? And what's he therefore doing about it? Rereahu himself, I've known him for a few years now, I think from back when he was at libraries and I was at libraries. And I've just been absolutely fascinated by his approach to innovation, which is very deeply Mātauranga based, but is also at the same time quite willing to challenge sort of what it's a traditional ways of doing and being, I think. And it's been really, really always been an inspiration to me. And I'm really happy to bring him on. So I'm going to bring him on in a second and get him to introduce himself however he will. Kia ora, there you are.
Morena. Kia ora tātou. Yeah, tuatahi ake, ngā puke ki hauraki ka tāre hua e mihi ana ki te whenua, e tangi ana ki te tangata. Ko moe hau ki tai, ko te aroha ki uta, hauraki te whenua, marutu ahu te tangata. Nei, pare hauraki mihi ana ki a koutou tēnei wā, nei, ahikurangi maunga, waia puawa, whareponga marae, Ngāti Porou iwi, nei hoki a pureora, a wai miha miringa te kakara, Rereahu iwi e mihi ana ki a koutou katoa. Ko Rereahu Collier tōku ingoa, no ngā tōpito katoa, o Aotearoa, ahau, anō nei he kaimahi au ki te kaunihera o Tāmaki Makaurau, ki te kapa nui o he oranga whānau, healthy families, ki te kaunihera o Tāmaki Makaurau. Kia ora everyone, Rereahu Collier is the name. If you haven't recognised already, hardcore Māori at the heart of everything that I do, and ensure that is the first thing that I carry moving forward. The way that I start my day is always aligning myself to Te Ao Māori. The way I carry myself in my mahi, Māori is the first thing that I come across, but it's a matter of balancing that within the modern context as well. How do we hold ourselves to the traditional elements of Mātauranga Māori living in the modern world? And that's something that I aspire to share with us today. Hoi anō, tahuri te puna o mihi ki a koe, taku tuakana, he Baruch, mō i whakatūwhira i tēnei puna kōrero, i tēnei wānanga, ma tātou katoa i tēnei wā. Mihi ana, kia ora tātou katoa.
Oh, kia ora, brother, you finished everything. No, I was going to say, what are you trying to do? What are you going to change the world? But I feel like you've already talked a little bit about it. So yeah, I mean, it's really cool to have you on today, brother. It's we've had many conversations, and I think about what we're trying to shift and what we're trying to change. And yeah, what do you want to talk about today?
Yeah, 100%. And just reflecting back on what you had said, that we first met back in libraries, 2018. 2018 was my first start in the libraries, my first stint in Auckland Council, and I think co-design was the first thing that's really sparked my interest when it came to work and innovation. But for me, it was a matter of how do we align Mātauranga Māori in that space. So one of the key whakatauāki that I always refer back to in that space, e tipu e rea mō ngā rā o tō wao, ko tō ringa ki ngā rākau a te Pākehā, hei oranga mo tō tinana, ko tō ngākau ki ngā taonga o tipuna Māori, hei tiki mo tō māhunga, ko tō wairua ki te atua, nāna nei ngā mea katoa. And that's kōrero from Tā Apirana Ngata really highlights, I think, the need for us to be able to step in both worlds at the same time. And I think that's something that's really sits true to my ngākau, to my manawa, and everything that I try to do. So maybe that's something that we can talk about today.
I'd love to, right? I'd love to.
I can safely acknowledge, Chief, that you've been one of the po that have really helped to shape my journey in understanding both of those worlds. So really, I think this is going to be a wānanga amongst the both of us, and blessed for anybody else who sits amongst the space as well.
Good, brother. You honor me. I'm not sure it's much deserved, but I'll take it. What? No, that's a really interesting place. Sort of the how do you keep a foot in multiple worlds? I was going to say both worlds, but it's more than both worlds, isn't it? It's many worlds, eh?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a part of the complexity that we try and navigate when it comes to those. I think firstly we acknowledge that kind of just being nowadays is a challenge in itself. I would admit that this week has been a hard week for me, but there will always be times where we need to recenter, reconnect ourselves to the things that really matter to us. So just wanting to acknowledge that, when things are tough, they are tough, but me haere tonu. I ngā wā o te pai he pai, I ngā wā o te kino tauwhawhitia. So when things are going good, they're going great. When things aren't going well, just finding that support. So, it's one thing to acknowledge that that's something that happens in one space, but to be able to do that in multiple spaces is a challenge in itself.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Yep.
Particularly for some of our Māori nowadays, really feeling the challenges of our identity in this current climate, this current time. So a bit of a motivator, a bit of encouragement for us that there is the light at the end of the tunnel. He hua kei tō wārai. It's something for us to hold on to. Yeah.
All right. Say a bit more about your experience of what it has been to be in multiple worlds.
Yeah, definitely. For me, I think it kind of takes it back to my upbringing. I'm very fortunate to be one of the kids who was brought up in kohanga reo, kura kaupapa, kura akonga, wharekura, and then shifting into mainstream. And it's really interesting to take it from that perspective, because I guess everything we do nowadays is mainstream first and Māori is the add-on. Whereas for me in my life, it was Māori first and mainstream was the add-on. So it was a challenge for me to understand what it was like to connect with everybody else outside of their Māori space. And I guess I pride myself in being an observer. I love to watch the world go by. I love to watch people and understand what their behaviors are, and try to unpack and understand that for myself as a way for me to respond to it, or to acknowledge that in whatever way. So when it comes to being able to walk into both of those worlds, is to understand that there are particular ways and practices that govern one particular mind frame, and one for the other. So it is a bit of a multitasking juggle to be able to go into those two spaces, but I think that's a blessing that I hold on to based on my upbringing, coming through Te Ao Māori first and seeing all of that come into fruition. Now leading into the mainstream world and how I apply the same tikanga kaua into everyday practice, so that's it's another way of seeing the world in a different lens.
Yeah. What's an example of can you, not to put you on the spot, but to also put you on the spot, what's an example of one of those struggles?
Funnily enough, some of the things that really highlight for me in terms of the struggles is the element of manaakitanga. I think that is something that is challenged nowadays. That's really seems like common knowledge for us as Māori. And in a sense, it's quite funny that that's the case, because Māori always seen as being really hearty people, being really hardcore, hard to approach, and all of those things. But when you're welcomed into our whare, you know, instantly you will feel the warmth of the whare around you. You will feel that sense of manaakitanga. And it removes the idea that there is an expectation to receive something as you're giving. So I think in this field, one of the challenges is that we're always wanting to receive something to justify our actions. But in the sense of Te Ao Māori is just to give without the notion that something will come back. It's the simple idea of koha. And I think that is something that I try to be mindful of as I come through in these spaces. It's still a journey in itself, you know. I do find myself getting caught up wanting to receive some things as time goes through. But I do know that in time in itself, I will see all of those, the fruits of my labor come back into the space. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I mean, and even just talking about koha itself, yeah, I think I have some sense of what you mean. Very much as very recent. I did not grow up here. But sort of just, you know, what's appropriate? How much? You know, it's like, it's some of those questions that you ask, and it's like, oh, I don't even know if the question is wrong. I feel like I'm asking the wrong question when I say, I feel like that's what you're saying. It's like when you say how much or what's appropriate, it's almost like the question itself is the wrong question to be asking.
Yeah. Funny you say that too. Just the other day, I saw a skit on Facebook. Some of these Māori skits coming through nowadays, they are actually really funny because it's true in some sense. Well, I guess it is true in all senses.
Yeah.
But it was around koha. In the office, you'll have someone trying to organize a koha and comes up to some person. What koha do you want to give? The first person gives a $50 note, and they're like, "Oh, you must value this person like very much because that's how much you're wanting to give." Turns around to the next person, and person number 2 goes, "Oh, what is the value, or what is considered an appropriate koha?" And the response is, you know, you give what you want to give. So, okay. So can it be a poem? It's like, yeah, if you want it to be. Like, can it just be a $5 note? Yeah, it's whatever you want to give. So they end up giving a $20 note, and they're like, "Oh, can I have $5 change?" And you know, it was a bit of a shock to the person collecting koha, because it's a sense of, you know, you give what you want to give without the expectation of getting something back in return.
Yep. So it's not a
Yeah. So a bit of a laugh in that little skit is that they're without fully understanding what the idea of koha is, we find ourselves challenged with what is considered appropriate, you know, and really what really comes from the manawa, what you think is appropriate as a koha to give is always what is the right answer in that sense. Yeah.
I think I started to understand koha a little bit better years ago. I don't remember what year it was now, but Roy Mata Tani Papao. And she was running a co-design workshop, and I was supporting. I think I just joined the co-design lab at the time. And there was a bunch of people from the community who kind of come in, and Roy actually created these bags of kai. Right, there was some food in it, and I think it was around this time of the year, sort of winterish. And there was some food in it, and a recipe, I think from Roy's grandma or something, about how to prepare that food. And like from a cost perspective, I don't think it was very much. You know, it's like it possibly was less than some of the vouchers, the fuel vouchers that we give to people there. But it just really struck me how thoughtful it was. And also what really struck me, of course, was when she was giving it to these people, it was like, you've been here at the workshop with me all day. You haven't had the time or the energy to think about kai, to think about how you're going to feed your family tonight. So here's something to help. Right. And it was like, it just really hit me also how touched people were. You know? So it was much more than a thing. It wasn't just a bag of food either. It wasn't like, oh, here's some food. It was sort of the thinking behind it. I think I started to understand koha then. I don't know if I still completely get the spiritual aspects of it yet, but I think
the beauty of it is that you can feel when it's the right thing to give, and in a sense, you can also read if it was the right thing to offer from a receiving perspective. Because
Interesting.
the way that I see it, is that the value of it is really defined by the people who are sharing in that space. In the same sense that kōrero in itself can be considered a koha. And that's where you start to see things like it's really filling your cup, or it's really challenging you to change, it's really challenging you to think differently. And I think that's something that really empowers me, particularly in this world, in this current climate. All of the mahi that I do in council is actually a lot of that. I find some kōrero that really challenges the way that I think and feel, and try to shift their narrative into the mahi, so that's, I guess, I share that. I spread that challenged mindset, that growth mindset, for my hoa mahi, for the staff that are around me, my colleagues, but also for the people that I serve. I think, being someone who grew up in South Auckland and Papakura, we were always challenged with the whakaaro that's, we won't really leave Papakura. We're limited to only a few spaces. And I like to be the person that really challenges that belief, that actually being someone who was raised in their space, and I've come out in what I would perceive as successful. It's still a ways to go. I wouldn't say that I'm shooting for the stars or I've reached the stars just yet, but it's definitely a stepping stone. And a big part of what contributes to that growth is really the ability for all of these kōrero, for all of these little pieces of koha, for all of these taonga that really shape the person that I am. And that's something that I hope to share with the generations that follow after me, particularly for our rangatahi Māori. Yeah, so really challenging in that sense.
I just want to slightly change tack, because there's two things you said. To ask you about the challenge, and you said, "Oh, it's a challenge and it's a blessing." What's been so blessed about being and having to live in just these two spaces? I can see how hard it is.
Yeah.
Was it a blessing for you?
Yeah. I think it's a blessing in the sense that, I think it's the practices that really align to, when it comes to being Māori, the practices is what really helps me to make my way going forward. But understanding where I am moving nowadays is something that, if I was to stay in a past mindset, if I was to only hold myself to that area, I don't think I would move as far as I would have. And I reflect back, go back to my high school days. It was me that made the choice to move to mainstream, because I felt that I was outgrowing my wharekura at the time. While it had given me a head start to my journey, it didn't. It actually really limited me in a sense. As a proud Māori, to say that's my own.
You're a bit right.
I hope my kaumātua don't beat me up when I take this back to the marae and say, no, we need to make a change. But I think it's a way of ensuring that our tikanga and our kawa stay relevant in today's days. The way technology is moving nowadays, I hear a lot of kōrero about AI, and how mātauranga Māori is sitting in that space. In a lot of sense, that in itself is a really big challenge for intellectual property and cultural property purposes. But in the same sense, it's a blessing, because that increases the accessibility to our communities, to our whānau that really need some of this kōrero. I guess it's in the way that it's used. There's a particular power in holding all of this, and actually being
I think I can't say understand, but I think I recognize what you mean. It's I've been digging into quite a lot of, with my own study, relationality and some of the stuff, and something that really strikes me about the whole AI conversation, for instance, or even robotics, a lot of this kind of stuff, is for a lot of people, they're struggling with the idea of AI, or sort of non-human, as being sentient or of having intelligence. But in sort of relational worldviews such as Māori, or even some of my background, we're used to it, you know. The forest is sentient.
Yeah.
You know, the tree is a person. It's not that hard to think of AI or a so-called artificial thing as having personhood, eh? It's not that hard. It's not that hard to jump.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think?
It reminds me of a conversation that you and I had over at AUT, you know, and I think this is where you really highlighted the power of relationship for me, you know, the interconnectivity from one thing to another thing, and quite often there doesn't have to be ourselves involved in what that relationship is. And I guess in a sense, that's a small glimpse of how we try to understand what wairuatanga is. And in that sense is that there is a particular sense of mauri that you can give and you can receive when you are exploring in other spaces. And it's interesting to put that towards, I guess, the AI conversation, because it's something that's, I guess, in a sense, it is man-made. But I remember a conversation of Mauri that I shared with another tuakana of mine, Te Loman, quite well known person out in West Auckland.
Slightly famous, Timothy.
Yeah. Call him Matua nowadays. But just the idea of Mauri is something that's, if you place yourself in a particular area where you feel really connected to, for example, me down here in Hauraki, or me on the marae, I would have a stronger sense of Mauri, a stronger connection to these areas than, say, if you were to come through to my marae. While you would feel a sense of Mauri, you would feel the warmth of the whare as you come into it. That would be a very different level to what I would feel. And in the same sense, if I was to come to the northern ends of Tāmaki Makaurau, might feel a little dangerous over there, but I think just being able to understand how we can give and receive Mauri in terms of the ways that we operate in this sort of space, I think is another interesting element for us to consider when we move into these sorts of spaces.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely on that sort of. How do we consider Māori, and sort of how do we reconsider some of these older, more ancient ideas as we sort of go into a new world, Sort of that's a real thing. There's just a couple of comments coming through. I just want to sort of touch on that. One is from Dee, who says, can I show this? Yes, I think I can. Yep, just about the conversation about koha. Thank you. Yeah, I think there's a few of us who, particular tangata tiriti, who sort of have been struggling with understanding this, so that's appreciated. There's also a question in here. I think I just want to pull this up because I think that could shape the rest of our conversation here. So the question is, do you have any specific innovation projects you're working on right now, or is it more of a way of being and thinking?
Oh, that's an interesting one.
I thought you might like that one.
Good partai, that one. I'm involved in two innovation projects at the moment, and it's a bit of an and based on that question. I do have some innovation projects, but I am trying to incorporate ways of being or ways of seeing whānau come through. So with my mahi and healthy families, South Auckland, I'm very fortunate to spend a bit of time with the mana whenua based in Papakura, so Ngāti Tamaterā. One of the kaupapa that I have collaborating with them is around, mana motuhake o te kai. How do we empower our whānau when it comes to having access to kai? And I guess it takes away this whakaaro that I think nowadays we realize that there's a particular privilege with kai at the moment, and it shouldn't be. That's something that we should always have access to, because it's an essential need for us to live. So partnering with mana whenua is to enable them to be some of the leaders when it comes to the kai space. For me, really, it's around supporting them and making sure that the way that they're working has elements of mātauranga Māori. And no, this isn't me trying to bring in my haurakitanga to Ngāti Tamaterā or my Ngāti Porou coming in to take over what Ngāti Tamaterā is doing, but really it's just supporting them and making sure that the mahi they do is actually being highlighted in the spaces that I'm involved in Auckland Council. So with them being the leaders and gathering some of this key kōrero around kai with the work that they're doing, I can use that to inform our mainstream space here in council, Te Kaunihero Tāmaki, to lean more into how we can give better access to our communities around kai. So that's one of them. The other one that I'll really touch on is the aspect of well-being hubs that are being led by Auckland Council. So again, coming back to our time in the libraries, lucky enough to unpack with the small community of Waimahia, Clendon, in South Auckland around what well-being means and how that can be reflected within our Māori communities, particularly in our spaces. So that piece of mahi has been really insightful for me in the sense that our spaces are now becoming, or our council spaces are becoming little whare wānanga, little pockets of what we would consider a marae. So how we would perceive, I guess, the feelings that we would have when our whānau go to the marae, and the comfort that brings, the warmth that brings, the sense of manaakitanga and the pride that comes with it. How do those values then reflect onto the spaces within council, but the aspirations really being led by our whānau? And again, for me, is just to ensure that we're walking confidently and firmly in those fields. So, you know, it's not just me that has to uphold this journey of being in both spaces. It's those that are around me. And I think it's just a matter of seeing that both sides are being heard. Both sides are being respected in the same sense.
And I find it really interesting because both of those examples, and this is partly because I know your work, but both of those examples you've given are examples also of you trying to, walking in both worlds, ne? It's like, what does Mātauranga Māori mean in the modern context? What does modernity mean in the Mātauranga Māori context, eh?
Yeah, 100%.
That's quite strong examples of that,
Yeah, and I think in a deeper sense too, how Mātauranga Māori benefits everybody in Aotearoa, but also all of the ways that we live across the whole of Aotearoa help to uplift Mātauranga Māori in the same sense. So a bit of, you know, Mauri tuku, Mauri hono, Mauri atu, Mauri mai, a sense of their koha atu, koha mai as well. I think in that sense there's implication. So tau utu utu is probably the better thought to use in that sense.
For those of us tangata tereti, could you?
Tau utu utu. So one particular tikanga o kawa that you would see on a marae is tau utu utu. So as speakers on the marae, they go back and forth, and that's the kawa of tau utu utu. And compared to koha, koha is the idea where you give without the expectation of receiving. Tau utu utu, or utu in some sense, the positive side of this is to give and receive at the same time. So you're reciprocating what you're sharing. So I think that's something that we're really highlighting. Good partnership.
Very cool. And that's also what you're referring to when you talk about Māori. So what did you say? Māori atu, Māori mai, and that's the same thing you're referring to. Exchanging Māori, almost reciprocating Māori.
Exactly. So
and I knew this would happen. We're out of time. I'm gonna say, well, let's break the rules for a change and go on, because this is really, really interesting kōrero. Because I do want to ask you, like, in all of these things that you're trying to do, what's getting in the way? What makes it? What's getting in the way of what you're trying to change, bro?
So this this is probably the real challenging side of me, eh? And I'll preface the kōrero with the saying that I learnt down in Te Wānanga o Raukawa. Mihi a te tangata, werohi a te kōrero. Mihi a te tangata means to acknowledge the person, or acknowledge the people. Werohi a te kōrero means to challenge the discussion. Nice. So, you know, and that's a way of us ensuring that we're maintaining constructive kōrero and being positive and respectful to the people that we are highlighting, but challenging some of the narratives that may come through. I'm a strong believer in the sense that it's our people that really need to grow and really need to challenge ourselves. So when we talk about barriers, initially you start by taking a look inwards. You know, we start to reflect upon ourselves, and we address what are the things that are really challenging us. And I feel like for some of our people, some of our iwi, we're really staying too close to ourselves. Like, there isn't a sense of openness, and if we're wanting to have this mauri atu mauri mai element, is that we need to learn to give first. You know, we can't always be staunch, we can't always be hearty, and I think that's a practice that highlights benefits across the board everywhere. You know, it's not just a Māori thing that we need to acknowledge. I think that's something for all of us in Aotearoa, that we learn to give first without the expectation of receiving something, and in doing so, we will receive something without the expectation of giving. And that's one of the real big challenges that our whānau face at the moment. We're unwilling to give, and therefore we're really upset that we don't receive anything. And yeah, it's a bit of a funny whakaro. And I often compare that kōrero to you know, some of our whanaunga across the waters, across you know, our tangata moana. And I've spoken to a few of my friends about this too, because every time I see our Pasifika whānau here in Aotearoa, they're just really grateful, eh? And it often challenges me because it makes me upset that we're not grateful for the things that we have. Yep, it is important to highlight that there's a history with what's led us to where we are now, but even in the small things that we do hold still, our tikanga, our kawa, for example, those are things that we can still be grateful for and let that elevate our way. I think removing the idea that we're still being challenged by the woes of the past and identifying our way moving forward. Yeah.
Ooh, you're challenging me. I'm just FYI. No, I think yeah, that's really interesting. I think I find it really, really interesting. Sort of this, yeah, what you said about gratitude, but also at the same time, I'm going to have to take some time to it. I don't have a response, right? But no, I think that's really interesting. It's how we are in the world, and yeah, I don't know.
In a sense, you know, we're only a small part of the world as well, and just acknowledging, actually, probably one thing that I really want to highlight, in a result of all of that kōrero, when we show that we're willing to give, it's something that is felt across the world, you know. And our culture is a big example of that. The haka is a good example of that. It's one of the things that has really put us on the map. And just remembering, you know, a time last year, you mentioned Roimata's name. She actually roped me in for a kapa haka kaupapa last year, and we travelled Italy to perform.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah,
across the world. So
yeah.
You know, all it takes is a little bit of a give, and you start to see all of these amazing things come into fruition. And yeah, I think that's kind of the space that I find myself at now, where I've done a lot of this journey working in both worlds. Now I find myself circling back to giving back to giving back to my people, giving back to my roots, to my whakapapa. Really proud to say that all of the things I've learned about the mainstream world is what I'm drawing back into our Ao Māori, back to my marae and taharua, and just trying to see a bit of growth for our community.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating, Rereahu. It's like sort of, I think a lot of people are, what's the word? So much has been taken that it's hard to give anymore. And I think when I sort of look at I'll say it. It's like people have asked me, as someone from India, people have asked me, like, have you experienced racism in New Zealand? I'm like, well, yeah, but not as much as Māori.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, it's not like, and when I sort of look at how it is to have been treated in your own land, that's my stream. I'll say it. It's fucked up.
Yeah,
I'll say
100%.
You know, it's like, seriously. But at the same time, I mean, sort of what you're talking about, and dang, bro, I don't know if I would have the courage to go there. To be quite honest, it's like, no, I've got to give first to be able to receive. There's something to.
Yeah.
I think that's something really, really intense.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm gonna have to say what I really think offline. Nah, jokes. Not in front of you, no. But I think thanks for that. I think that was really, really thoughtful. You've actually made me. You stopped me in my tracks, as I said. I don't quite know how to respond to that, but I think there's something really deep to think about there. We should probably start to close. Like I promised people, 30 minutes, and it's been a bit more than like 37. Is there anything you'd like to share? If people would like to keep in touch with you, or sort of keep in touch with your mahi, is there a way? How do people connect with you?
Yeah. I think just highlighting one of the big kaupapa for our team is Healthy Families. The wider network just want to acknowledge that our 10-year anniversary is coming up.
Oh wow!
And nice. To highlight the success of the mahi that has been over that journey. So for those who are really interested in the mahi that I do, but more broadly our team and Healthy Families, connect into their kaupapa. Heaps of spaces across Tāmaki, but even across the whole of Aotearoa. So really tune into some of the mahi that's happening there, and that may also highlight a small glimmer of hope in terms of how we can live in these two worlds harmoniously. That's a big word for me. But yeah, I think you set a really good example of what it means to be tangata tiriti. And even in some of these wānanga, some of these kōrero, I can only imagine just how much of an impact this creates for the supports that our tangata whenua have, our whānau Māori have. So just want to mihi to you and our tino hoa, our tangata tiriti that are really holding up the space. Mihi ana kia koutou katoa. Ke aku nui, ke aku rahi, tēnei ka tūpau i mua i a koutou i tēnei wā. Kia ora mai tātou katoa, mihi nui ana.
Kia ora. Thank you very much. And I think with that, we will sort of close the stream off. Thanks, Rereahu. I can't thank you in a poetic way. I'm going to have to keep it quite. Cheers, bro.
Yeah. I was going to say that.
You're going to have to see the poetry in that. But no, thank you very much for your kōrero, and it's. I'm just seeing some of the comments that are coming up. I think Saskia is saying the warmth has really come through, and I think that really sums it up. Kia ora. To everybody who's watching, thank you very much. If you're watching this live or watching this afterwards, kia ora. And as Rereahu has said, we'll look at what the Healthy Families are doing on the 10-year anniversary. For those of you that are subscribed to the newsletter, I'll try and find that link and pop it on as well, so you can see what's happening there. Thank you very much for spending your Friday lunchtime with us, and I will end the stream now. Kia ora koutou.